The box wasn't on the porch when I left for my morning run, but it was there when I got back, a plain brown cube sitting squarely in the center of the welcome mat. It was large enough to hold a microwave, sealed with an excessive amount of packing tape, and had no shipping label, no return address, nothing. Just my name, Ilara, written in a neat, familiar cursive on a simple white sticker. For a moment, I thought it was from my husband, Liam. He was always surprising me with things. A first edition of a book I'd mentioned loving. A ridiculous kitchen gadget he'd seen online. But this felt different. There was a stillness to it, an unnerving sense of deliberation. The crisp October air, which had felt so invigorating just moments before, now seemed to carry a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. I dragged the box inside, the corrugated cardboard rough against my sweaty palms. It was surprisingly light for its size. I set it down in the foyer, my heart thumping a strange, erratic rhythm against my ribs. I grabbed a pair of scissors from the kitchen drawer, my mind racing through possibilities. A prank? My sister, Sarah, had a juvenile sense of humor. Maybe it was filled with packing peanuts and a single rubber chicken. I sliced through the tape, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet house. I folded back the cardboard flaps and my breath caught in my throat. Inside, nestled in a soft, cream-colored fleece blanket, was a baby. A living, breathing infant, fast asleep, its tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. My first thought, a wild, nonsensical jumble of panic and disbelief, was that this was part of the prank. A doll. It had to be a doll. A hyper-realistic one designed to shock me. But then the baby stirred, a tiny hand uncurling, fingers no bigger than seashell fragments flexing in the air. A soft, gurgling sigh escaped its perfect rosebud lips. It was real, utterly, terrifyingly real. My mind went blank. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. I just stared, my brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Who would do this? Who would leave a baby on a doorstep? Tucked beside the infant was a folded piece of paper. My hand trembled as I reached for it. The note was written in the same cursive as the label. It contained only 5 words. "She looks just like you." And that's when I truly looked. I leaned closer, my gaze tracing the delicate features, the soft curve of the jawline, the faint, almost imperceptible cleft in the chin, the dusting of dark hair, so fine it was like spun silk. And then I saw it. Just above the baby's left eyebrow was a tiny, crescent-shaped birthmark, a pale, coffee-colored moon against porcelain skin. The exact same birthmark I had, the one I usually covered with concealer. My own reflection, a ghost from 30 years ago, was staring back at me from inside a cardboard box. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a random baby. The note wasn't a cruel joke. It was a statement of fact. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a cry. Liam and I had tried for years to have a child. We'd endured the clinical coldness of fertility clinics, the hope and despair of failed IVF cycles, the quiet, aching grief that had settled into the corners of our marriage. We had finally accepted it, made our peace with a life that would be just the 2 of us. And now this impossible, beautiful, terrifying child who wore my face. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy and numb, and dialed Liam. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Hey you, how was the run?" I couldn't form words. A choked, strangled sound was all that came out. "Ilara, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay?" his voice sharpened with concern. "You need to come home," I finally managed to whisper, the words feeling foreign in my own mouth. "Right now, something's happened." I didn't tell him what. How could I? How could I explain that our quiet, orderly life had just been shattered by a mystery wrapped in a fleece blanket? While I waited, I couldn't take my eyes off the baby. I knelt by the box, my body moving on some instinct I didn't know I possessed. I reached in and gently touched her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft. She stirred again, her eyelids fluttering, and then they opened. They were my eyes, not just the color, a deep hazel that shifted between green and brown, but the shape, the way they tilted just slightly at the corners. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected not just my appearance, but my entire genetic code. The prank theory evaporated completely, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. This was something else entirely, something calculated and deeply, personally invasive. When Liam's car screeched into the driveway, I was still on the floor, mesmerized and horrified. He burst through the door, his face pale with worry. "Elara, what is it?" He stopped dead when he saw the box and the tiny, awake infant staring up from it. His confusion was a mirror of my own. What is that?" he stammered. I just pointed at the baby and then at my own face. "Look," I whispered. "Just look at her." He knelt beside me, his eyes wide. He looked from the baby to me and back again. The recognition dawned on his face, followed by a wave of pure astonishment. "Oh my God," he breathed. It's you." The note was still clutched in my hand. I held it out to him. He read it, his brow furrowing. "Who would do this? Who even knows about—" He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. Who knew about my birthmark, my family, my sister? My phone buzzed on the floor beside me. I glanced at the screen. It was Sarah. My blood ran cold. I let it go to voicemail. The baby started to fuss, a small, plaintive cry that pierced the thick silence in the room. Without thinking, I reached in and lifted her out of the box. She was so light, so fragile. I cradled her against my chest, and her cries quieted almost instantly. She snuggled into my warmth, her tiny face pressed against my neck. And in that moment, as I held this impossible child, who was a perfect, miniature copy of me, I knew two things with absolute certainty. First, that I would protect her with my life. And second, that my life was in terrible, imminent danger. The person who had done this hadn't just given me a gift. They had delivered a threat. The first few hours were a blur of panicked whispers and frantic, useless actions. We called the police, of course. 2 officers arrived, a man and a woman, their expressions a mixture of professional sympathy and barely concealed bewilderment. They took the box, the blanket, the note. They asked questions we couldn't answer. Did we have any enemies? Was anyone holding a grudge? Was there anyone who might want to play a sick joke? I kept glancing at the baby, now sleeping in a makeshift bed we'd fashioned from a laundry basket and soft towels. Every time I mentioned my sister, a vague, disloyal guilt pricked at me. "She has a strange sense of humor sometimes," I said, the words feeling thin and inadequate. The female officer, a woman named Detective Miller with kind but perceptive eyes, seemed to sense my hesitation. A strange sense of humor is one thing, Ms. Vance. Leaving an infant on a doorstep is a felony. They left with promises to check local hospitals, to run the note for prints, but it was clear they had nothing to go on. We were alone with the mystery, a mystery that was now cooing softly in her sleep. After they were gone, the house felt cavernous, the silence amplifying our own racing thoughts. Liam paced the living room, while I sat on the sofa, the laundry basket at my feet. "It has to be connected to the IVF," he said, running a hand through his hair for the 10th time. "It's the only thing that makes any sense." We had gone through 3 rounds of in vitro fertilization 5 years ago. It was a grueling, emotionally draining ordeal that had ended in heartbreak. We'd had a number of viable embryos, eggs harvested from me, sperm from Liam. The clinic had told us the remaining ones were cryogenically preserved. We'd signed the papers, paid the annual storage fees, and tried to put that chapter behind us. But now the memory of it felt ominous. "But who? How?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The clinic was reputable. The security was top-notch. The only person outside of the medical staff who knew every intimate detail of our journey was my sister, Sarah. She had been my rock through it all. She held my hand during injections, brought me ice cream after failed implantations, and listened to me cry for hours. The thought of her being involved felt like a physical betrayal, a knife twisting in my gut. But the handwriting on the note, it was so similar to hers. Elegant, with a distinctive loop on the Y. I tried to push the thought away. It was impossible. Sarah loved me, didn't she? The baby, whom we had started tentatively calling Lily, woke up hungry. A frantic trip to the 24-hour pharmacy for formula, bottles, and diapers followed. The mundane reality of caring for an infant was a bizarre counterpoint to the surreal nightmare we were living. As I fed her, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, her hazel eyes locked on mine, a fierce, primal wave of protectiveness washed over me. She was mine. I didn't know how, but I knew it in my bones. She was my daughter. This conviction only deepened the fear. If she was mine, she had been stolen from me, not as a baby, but as an egg, a possibility. Someone had taken a piece of me, grown it in secret, and then delivered it to my door like a package. Why? What was the end game? The next day, Sarah called again. This time I answered, putting the phone on speaker so Liam could listen. "Ilara, oh my God, I heard what happened. The police called me asking questions. Are you okay? A baby? On your doorstep? That's insane." Her voice was a symphony of shock and concern. It sounded so genuine, so perfectly pitched, that for a moment my suspicion felt like a monstrous accusation. We're dealing with it, Sarah," I said, my voice tight. "It's a lot. I can't even imagine. Do you need anything? I can come over right now. I'll cancel my whole day." The offer was so typical of her, always the first to rush in during a crisis. But now her eagerness felt suffocating. "No, that's okay," Liam interjected smoothly, giving me a warning look. "We're just overwhelmed. The police have asked us to keep things quiet for now, not have too many people over." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, of course, I understand. But Ilara, you know I'm here for you. Whatever you need, it's just so bizarre. Do they know who she is?" The question was innocent enough, but the way she asked it, with a slight, almost imperceptible tremor, sent a fresh shiver down my spine. "No," I said flatly. "No idea." After we hung up, Liam looked at me, his expression grim. She's a good actress, too good. That evening, while Lily slept, I went down to the basement and pulled out a box of old photo albums and letters. I found a birthday card Sarah had sent me last year. I placed it next to a photo I'd taken of the note before the police took it. The handwriting was identical, the distinctive loop on the Y in Happy Birthday, the elegant slant of the L's in Ilara. It was her. There was no doubt. The realization didn't come with a satisfying click of discovery, but with a dull, hollow ache of grief. My sister, my only sibling, the person I had trusted implicitly my entire life, was behind this. The why was a vast, terrifying unknown. I started to spiral, my mind replaying every conversation, every shared secret, searching for a clue I had missed. I remembered her constant questions during the IVF process. How many eggs did they get? What were the chances of success? I'd thought it was sisterly concern. Now it felt like reconnaissance. I remembered her financial troubles a few years back, the vague complaints about credit card debt and a bad investment. My parents had helped her out, but she had always been resentful of the fact that the bulk of the family trust was designated for me, contingent upon my having a child to carry on the family name. An old-fashioned patriarchal stipulation in my grandfather's will that we had all dismissed as archaic until now. Suddenly, a monstrous motive began to take shape, a motive built on greed and a lifetime of perceived slights. The baby in the other room wasn't a gift. She was a pawn in a game I didn't even know I was playing. And the game, I suspected, was far from over. The person who had gone to such elaborate, sociopathic lengths wouldn't just drop off a baby and walk away. This was just the opening move. The thought was terrifying, but it also ignited something else within me, a cold, hard resolve. I would not be a pawn. I would find out the truth, and I would protect my daughter, no matter who I had to fight. The days that followed were a strange dichotomy of tender, new mother moments, and a gnawing, ever-present dread. Every coo from Lily, every time she gripped my finger with surprising strength, my heart swelled. But every creak of the floorboards, every car that slowed down on our street, my heart seized with fear. Liam and I moved like ghosts in our own home, speaking in hushed tones, our conversations constantly circling back to Sarah. We had proof of the handwriting, but it was circumstantial. Accusing her outright without more concrete evidence felt like walking into a trap blindfolded. She was smart, manipulative. She would twist it, paint me as unstable, grieving, and paranoid. And who would believe me? The woman who couldn't have a child, suddenly claiming a baby that looked just like her, was part of a conspiracy orchestrated by her loving sister. It sounded like the plot of a bad movie. Detective Miller called periodically, but there was no news, no matching prints on the box, no reports of a missing infant that fit Lily's description. It was as if Lily had materialized out of thin air, a perfect, unrecorded human being. This precision was, in itself, terrifying. It spoke of meticulous planning, of resources and connections that went beyond a simple, desperate act. It pointed to a conspiracy far more complex than just my sister's jealousy. One evening, I was scrolling through old emails, searching for anything, any clue, when I found the correspondence from the fertility clinic 5 years ago. I read through the dry, clinical language, detailing the procedures, the consent forms, the storage agreements. My eyes landed on the name of the lead embryologist who had handled our case, Dr. Alistair Finch. I remembered him vaguely, a quiet, serious man with tired eyes. On a whim, I searched his name online. The first few results were standard, his professional bio, a few published papers. But then I found It, a small article from a local business journal dated 2 years ago. Prominent embryologist Dr. Alastair Finch abruptly leaves Northgate Fertility Center amidst ethics investigation. My blood turned to ice. The article was sparse on details, citing patient confidentiality, but it hinted at procedural irregularities and a quiet, forced resignation. He had essentially vanished from the medical community afterward. Northgate had buried the story to avoid a scandal. I showed it to Liam. "This is it," he said, his voice low and intense. "This has to be the how." The pieces started to slot into place. Sarah, desperate for money. A disgraced doctor, perhaps also desperate, with access to the one thing that could solve her problem: my genetic material. It was a horrifyingly plausible scenario. Sarah could have approached him, offered him a significant sum of money to steal one of our cryopreserved embryos. He would have the expertise to arrange a secret surrogacy, ensuring the baby was born off the grid with no official records. It explained everything: the lack of a police trail, the baby's miraculous appearance, the uncanny resemblance. It was my embryo, our child. My mind reeled, replaying Sarah's behavior over the past year. Her sudden windfall, she'd claimed, was from a lucky stock market tip. The new car, the expensive vacation to Italy, it hadn't been luck. It had been payment for a crime so monstrous I could barely comprehend it. She had sold my child. Or rather, she had commissioned my child's creation for her own twisted ends. But why give her to me now? Why not just keep her, present her as her own abandoned niece, and gain control of the trust that way? The answer, when it came, was so chilling it made me physically sick. The trust stipulation was specific. The funds would be managed by the parent. If I were the parent, I would control the money. But if I were deemed unfit, if something were to happen to me, custody would likely pass to the next of kin, my loving, doting aunt, Sarah. The baby wasn't the endgame, she was the setup. Sarah's plan wasn't just to get the money, it was to get me out of the picture entirely. The concerned phone calls, the offers to help, it was all an act, a way to monitor my state of mind, to lay the groundwork for a narrative of a woman unhinged by a miracle baby. A woman suffering from some form of postpartum psychosis, despite never having been pregnant. She was waiting for me to crack, or she was going to create a situation that made it look like I had. The walls of my house, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in. I felt like I was being watched, every move scrutinized. One afternoon, I was changing Lily when I noticed the teddy bear on her changing table, a gift Sarah had dropped off a few days ago. "Just a little something for the mystery baby," she'd trilled. Its plastic eyes seemed to gleam. On impulse, I picked it up and squeezed it. It felt oddly hard in the center. I found a seam at the back and carefully pulled at the threads. Inside the stuffing, nestled against a small, hard plastic case, was a tiny electronic device with a minuscule lens. A nanny cam. My breath hitched. She was watching me, listening to every conversation, every lullaby, every whispered fear I shared with Liam. She was gathering evidence for her story, waiting to twist my love for my daughter into a symptom of madness. I carefully stitched the bear back up, my hands shaking with a rage so cold and pure it felt like a shard of ice in my chest. I placed it back on the table, its black eyes staring blankly forward. The game had changed. Sarah thought she was the one in control, the puppet master pulling the strings. But now I knew the rules. I knew her plan. and I would not let her win. Liam and I sat in the dark that night, Lily sleeping soundly between us, and we made a plan of our own. We were no longer just victims. We were fighting back. We couldn't go to the police, not yet. Our evidence was still a web of assumptions and a single hidden camera in a teddy bear. A good lawyer would tear it apart. Sarah would play the victim, the worried sister. We needed something undeniable. We needed her to confess. The decision was made in the hushed quiet of our kitchen, the only light coming from the stove hood. We would turn her own weapon against her. If she wanted to watch and listen, we would give her a show. A meticulously crafted performance designed to make her overconfident, to make her believe her plan was working perfectly, and to lure her into a trap she wouldn't see coming. The first step was to secure our home. Liam, who was surprisingly tech-savvy, did a full sweep of the house. He found 2 more bugs. One was a tiny audio recorder tucked behind a bookshelf in the living room. The other a GPS tracker attached with magnets underneath my car. The sheer audacity of it, the violation, was breathtaking. She had infiltrated every part of our lives. We left the bugs in place. They were now our tools. The next day, I called my mother, knowing Sarah would be listening. I pitched my voice to sound frayed, exhausted. "I'm just so tired, Mom," I sighed, letting a tremor enter my voice. It's so much. I love her, this baby. I love her so much it scares me. But I don't know who she is. I feel like I'm losing my mind." I could almost feel Sarah on the other end of the line, wherever she was, leaning in, a smug smile on her face. Liam played his part too. He made a loud, concerned phone call to his brother, talking about how worried he was about me, how I wasn't sleeping, how I was becoming obsessed with the baby's origins. We were building the narrative for her, brick by painful brick. It was the most difficult acting job of my life. I had to feign instability, while my mind was sharper and more focused than it had ever been. I had to look at Lily, my beautiful, miraculous daughter, and pretend to the hidden cameras that my love for her was a dangerous fixation. Every moment felt like a betrayal of my own heart, but I knew it was necessary. While we put on our show, we were also gathering our own intelligence. Liam used a burner phone to hire a private investigator, a discreet ex-cop named Frank, to dig into Dr. Finch's life, and more importantly, to follow Sarah. We needed to know who she was meeting, where her money was coming from, and if there was a surrogate mother out there who might be a witness. The next phase of our plan was riskier. We needed to get a DNA sample from Lily and myself and have it tested secretly without raising any flags. A legal, court-ordered test would alert Sarah. We had to go off the books. Frank, our PI, put us in touch with a private lab, one that valued discretion and cash payments. Getting the samples was easy, a simple cheek swab for both of us. Sending them off without Sarah knowing was the hard part. We timed it for a day when Frank's surveillance showed Sarah was occupied with a real estate appointment across town. Liam drove to a shipping center 2 towns over, paying in cash and using a fake return address. The waiting began. The lab promised results in 72 hours. It was the longest 3 days of my life. During that time, we escalated our performance. I started leaving demented notes around the house, where I knew Sarah would see them if she ever came inside. Scraps of paper with frantic handwriting asking, "Who are you?" and "Where did you come from?" I let the house get messy. I stopped answering texts from friends. I was method acting my way through a nervous breakdown. Sarah, as expected, took the bait. She started calling more frequently, her voice dripping with faux concern. "Elara, you sound terrible. Are you eating? You need to let me help you. I'm worried Liam can't handle this on his own." Her offers to come over became more insistent. We knew the final confrontation was approaching. She would want to be there for the final act, to witness my collapse firsthand. We decided to set the stage. Liam made another loud staged phone call, this time pretending to be talking to a psychiatrist. "I don't know what to do," he said, his voice cracking convincingly. "She's talking to the baby as if it's a ghost. She thinks it's a message from someone. I think I need to have her committed." He then announced he had to fly to Chicago for an emergency work trip, that he'd be gone for 2 nights. "My brother's going to come stay with her," he said, loud enough for any listening device to pick it up. But his brother was in on it. He would never show up. I would be alone, vulnerable, the perfect target. The night before Liam's trip, the DNA results came back to our anonymous email address. I opened the file, my heart hammering. The report was simple, clinical. It confirmed with 99.999% certainty that I, Elara Vance, was the biological mother of the child designated as Jane Doe. Seeing it in black and white, the scientific proof of it, what my heart already knew was a profound, gut-wrenching validation. She was mine. She had always been mine. The rage and resolve inside me solidified into something unbreakable. Tomorrow Sarah was coming. She thought she was coming to push me over the edge, but she was walking into a trap that we had set just for her. There would be no more acting. Tomorrow she would face the truth, and so would we. The day of Liam's flight to Chicago dawned gray and overcast, the sky a flat, oppressive sheet of metal. It was a fitting backdrop for what was to come. He left early in the morning, making a show of kissing me goodbye at the front door, his voice loud as he gave me last-minute instructions, all for the benefit of the teddy bear's hidden lens. "Now you call me if you need anything. Mark will be here around noon. Just try to get some rest." The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, a profound and terrifying silence descended upon the house. I was truly alone with Lily, and the knowledge that my sister was on her way, intent on destroying me, was a cold weight in my stomach. But fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I had a role to play. I spent the morning meticulously preparing the stage. Liam had installed our own set of micro cameras the night before. Tiny devices hidden in a plant pot, a picture frame, and a decorative vase, all focused on the living room sofa. The system fed directly to a laptop hidden in the master bedroom closet, where Liam would be waiting. He wasn't going to Chicago. He was circling the block, waiting for my signal, ready to come back with the police, whom he had already put on alert with a carefully worded hypothetical concern about my unstable sister. I dressed the part of a woman on the edge, wearing a stained sweatshirt and leggings, my hair uncombed. I smudged my makeup to look like I'd been crying. I scattered a few of my frantic, handwritten notes on the coffee table. The house was quiet, save for Lily's soft breathing from her bassinet. I looked down at her, this innocent child, at the center of a monstrous plot, and my resolve hardened. This was for her. This was for the life that was stolen from us. At 11:30, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as she got out, carrying a large tote bag. She had a concerned, pitying expression plastered on her face, an expression I now knew was as fake as the designer handbag on her arm. I took a deep breath and opened the door before she could knock. "Sarah," I said, my voice deliberately weak and shaky. "You came." "Of course I came," she said, bustling inside and wrapping me in a hug that felt like being embraced by a snake. Her perfume was cloying, overwhelming. "I was so worried. Liam called me. He sounded frantic." She pulled back, her eyes scanning my face, my clothes, the messy room. I could see the flicker of triumph in her eyes. It was all going according to her plan. "Oh, honey," she cooed, "you look like you haven't slept in weeks. Where's the baby?" "She's sleeping," I mumbled, gesturing vaguely towards the bassinet. I let her guide me to the sofa. This was it, the performance of a lifetime. "Let me make you some tea," she said, heading for the kitchen. "Something soothing, you need to relax." I watched her go, my heart pounding. This was a classic move. Was she going to drug me, make me drowsy and confused to amplify my instability? I had to be ready for it. When she came back with 2 mugs, she handed one to me. "Here, chamomile with a little bit of honey, just like Mom used to make." I took the mug, my fingers wrapping around the warm ceramic. I raised it towards my lips, then hesitated, looking at her with wide, paranoid eyes. "What's in this?" I asked, my voice a conspiratorial whisper. She forced a patient smile. "Alara, it's just tea. Don't be silly." "You could have put something in it," I accused, letting my voice rise with manufactured hysteria. "To make me sleep, to make me quiet." Her smile tightened. "You're not well, Alara. You need help. I'm just trying to be here for you." "You're lying," I shrieked, standing up so abruptly that some of the tea sloshed onto the floor. "Everyone is lying to me." I was giving her exactly what she wanted, feeding her the evidence she needed. I could see her subtly adjusting her position on the sofa, making sure the teddy bear on the nearby shelf had a clear view of my episode. We went back and forth like this for nearly an hour. I accused her of spying on me. She calmly denied it, telling me I was delusional. I talked about the baby, calling her an angel, a ghost, a message. Sarah looked at me with those wide, false eyes, filled with a pity that was really just contempt. Finally, I decided it was time to spring the trap. I collapsed back onto the sofa, burying my face in my hands, and began to sob. "I just want to know who she is," I cried, the tears surprisingly real, fueled by the grief of her betrayal. "I feel like she's mine, Sarah. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel it in my soul. She has my eyes. She has my birthmark." I looked up at her, my face a mess. "How is that possible?" Sarah saw her opening. She moved closer, putting a comforting arm around me. "Oh, sweetie," she said, her voice dropping to a soothing, conspiratorial tone. "Sometimes when a woman wants a baby so badly, her mind can play tricks on her. You've been through so much trauma." "But it's not a trick," I insisted. "It's real." I took a deep breath. "The police, they found something," I lied, watching her face carefully. "A lead. They traced a payment to an anonymous surrogate. They think they know who hired her." I saw it then, a flicker of panic in her eyes, so fast I would have missed it if I hadn't been looking for it. Her mask, for the first time, had slipped. The hunter had just realized she might be the hunted. The panic in Sarah's eyes was a fleeting thing, quickly masked by her practiced look of concern. But I had seen it. It was the confirmation I needed. She took her arm from around my shoulders and sat back, her posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. "A lead? What kind of lead? Did they tell you who it was?" Her attempt at casual curiosity was betrayed by the tightness in her voice. "They didn't say," I said, deliberately vague, watching her. "They just said they were closing in, that the person who arranged it all left a financial trail. Something about a disgraced doctor." I let the words hang in the air between us. Dr. Alistair Finch. I didn't say his name, but I could see it land with the force of a physical blow. Her composure, so carefully maintained, began to fracture at the edges. "A doctor? Alara, you're not making sense. You're overwrought," she said, but her voice was a little too sharp, her denial a little too quick. "Am I?" I asked, my own voice changing, the manufactured hysteria draining away to be replaced by a cold, quiet calm that was far more unnerving. I stood up and walked over to the bassinet, looking down at Lily's sleeping face. "She's perfect, isn't she? Everything I ever wanted." I turned back to face my sister. The act was over. You know, for years I grieved. I grieved for the children Liam and I would never have. I grieved for these little lives that never got a chance. I looked directly at her. But they weren't all gone, were they, Sarah? You knew that. You knew the clinic had our embryos in storage. Sarah stood up, her face paling. "I don't know what you're talking about. You're scaring me, Alara. I think I should call someone." "You mean like you called Dr. Finch?" I said, the name finally spoken. Her flinch was undeniable this time. "You found a man who had lost his career, his reputation, a man who was desperate, and you made him an offer. How much did it cost, Sarah? How much was my child worth to you?" "You're insane," she breathed, her eyes darting towards the door. She was looking for an escape route. "No," I said, taking a step towards her. "I'm not. For the first time in months, everything is perfectly clear. You paid him to steal my embryo. You hired a surrogate. You orchestrated this entire thing, this entire nightmare, so you could get your hands on Grandpa's trust fund." Her face, which had been a mask of concern, was now twisting into a snarl of pure venom. The sister I knew was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating stranger. "You always had everything," she hissed, her voice low and trembling, with a rage that felt ancient. "You were always the perfect one. The one Mom and Dad adored, the one who got the perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect life. And then the trust. It was always supposed to be for both of us, but no. It had to go to you and your precious, non-existent baby." "So you made one," I finished for her, my voice flat. "You manufactured a baby, my baby, and you dropped her on my doorstep. What was the next step, Sarah? What was the grand finale? Were you going to have me, committed? Or was it something more permanent?" I gestured to the mug of tea she had brought me, now cold on the coffee table. "What's in the tea, Sarah? Something to make me confused? To help sell your story of the crazy, unstable mother who couldn't cope? The grieving sister who had no choice but to step in and take over for the good of the child, of course, and the money." She laughed then, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed in the quiet room. "You think you're so clever, but you have no proof. It's my word against the word of a crazy woman." "Are you sure about that?" I asked softly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen. A small, pre-written text message sent to Liam, now. At that exact moment, the front door burst open. Liam stood there, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers and a stone-faced Detective Miller. Sarah spun around, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. "What is this?" she gasped, looking from the police to me. "Liam, thank God you're here. She's having a complete breakdown. She's accusing me of the most horrible things." Liam didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on me, filled with a mixture of relief and love. "I heard every word, Sarah," he said, his voice hard as steel. Detective Miller stepped forward. "We all did," she said, gesturing towards the hidden cameras. "We have the whole conversation recorded." Sarah's jaw dropped. Her eyes darted around the room, finally landing on the teddy bear. The realization of how completely she had been outmaneuvered washed over her face, followed by a wave of pure, unadulterated fury. She lunged, not at the police, but at me. It was a desperate, wild attack, her hands clawing for my face, a strangled scream ripping from her throat. "You bitch! You ruined everything!" The officers were on her in a second, pulling her back, her arms flailing. They wrestled her hands behind her back, the click of the handcuffs sharp and final in the sudden silence. As they led her away, a sobbing, defeated mess, her eyes met mine one last time. There was no remorse in them, no regret, only a deep, bottomless well of hatred. And in that moment, I mourned. I mourned the sister I thought I had, the love I thought we shared, and the innocence that had been so violently stolen from all of us. The charade was over, the truth was out, but the real work of healing was only just beginning. The aftermath was a storm, the arrest, the interrogation, the media frenzy when the story inevitably leaked. "The embryo plot," one headline screamed. "Sister's betrayal, a stolen child and a fortune," read another. Our quiet suburban street was besieged by news vans for a week. We retreated into our home, which now felt like a fortress, and focused on the only thing that mattered, Lily. With Sarah in custody, the full sordid details of her plan came pouring out. Our private investigator, Frank, had tracked down the surrogate, a young woman named Maria, who had been paid a lump sum in cash and told she was carrying a child for an anonymous wealthy couple who wished to remain private. She had no idea the embryo was stolen. Her testimony, combined with Dr. Finch's confession, he folded under pressure, trading his testimony for a lighter sentence, and Sarah's own words, caught on our recordings, built an ironclad case. The motive was exactly as I had suspected, greed, pure and simple. Sarah was drowning in debt from a series of bad investments and a lifestyle she couldn't afford. She saw the family trust as her only way out. Her plan was diabolical in its cruelty. She had intended to use the drugged tea to sedate me, then stage a scene. She would have called 911, claiming I had become violent, a danger to myself and the baby. With my history of emotional distress from our infertility struggles and the evidence she had been gathering with her hidden cameras, she was confident I would be placed on an involuntary psychiatric hold. From there, she would have petitioned the court for emergency custody of Lily, painting herself as the heroic savior. With me institutionalized and deemed an unfit mother, control of the trust would have defaulted to her as the child's guardian. She had gambled everything on my breaking. She never considered that I might fight back. The legal proceedings were long and draining. I had to give a victim impact statement, a process that forced me to stand in a courtroom and look at my sister, a woman who now seemed like a complete stranger, and detail the profound violation she had inflicted upon us. I spoke of the years of grief she had watched me endure, knowing all along she held the key to my deepest desire and was twisting it into a weapon. I spoke of the terror of those first few days, the paranoia, the feeling of being watched in my own home. And I spoke of Lily, the innocent child brought into the world as a pawn, and how we were determined to give her a life filled with nothing but love and security, a life free from the shadow of her conception. Sarah was sentenced to 15 years in prison for kidnapping, conspiracy, and reckless endangerment. Dr. Finch received 5 years. It felt like justice, but it didn't feel like a victory. There was no joy in seeing my only sibling led away in handcuffs. There was only a profound, hollow sadness for the family that had been irrevocably broken. Once the trial was over, the slow process of building a new life began. We legally adopted Lily, a strange formality given that she was already ours in every way that mattered. Her birth certificate was amended, listing Liam and me as her parents. The name Jane Doe was officially replaced with Lily Hope Vance. We chose the middle name deliberately. She was the hope that had emerged from the wreckage. We sold the house. There were too many ghosts there, too many memories of fear and betrayal lurking in the corners. We moved to a small town by the coast, a place where no one knew our story, where we could just be a family. I went to therapy to process the trauma and the complex grief. How do you mourn someone who is still alive? How do you reconcile the loving memories of a sister from childhood with the monster she became? Some days were harder than others. A song on the radio, the scent of a particular flower, would trigger a memory of Sarah, and the wound would feel fresh again. But then I would look at Lily, and the pain would recede. She was the antidote to the poison. She was a living, breathing testament to the fact that something beautiful could grow from something so ugly. Liam and I, who had been tested in the most extreme way imaginable, found our bond was stronger than ever. We were partners, survivors. We had faced the darkness together and walked out into the light, holding hands. We were determined that Lily's story would not be defined by its beginning. We would tell her the truth one day when she was old enough to understand, but we would frame it as a story of love's triumph over greed, of resilience over betrayal. Her story was not about what was stolen, but about what was found. As the years passed, the sharp edges of the trauma began to soften. The storm of publicity died down, and we settled into the quiet rhythm of our new life. Our world became a gentle cycle of preschool drop-offs, trips to the beach to collect seashells, and bedtime stories read in a cozy armchair. Lily grew from a baby who wore my face into a little girl with a personality all her own. She had my hazel eyes and my stubborn chin, but she had Liam's easy laugh and his boundless curiosity. She was a whirlwind of energy and joy, a bright, vibrant force who filled our small coastal home with light. We never hid the truth of our family's past from ourselves, but we were careful to shield Lily from it. The story was ours to carry, not hers. We built new traditions, created new memories that slowly paved over the cracked foundations of our old life. My relationship with my parents was strained and complicated. They struggled to comprehend what Sarah had done, oscillating between denial and a deep, inconsolable grief. They visited, but their presence was often tinged with a sadness that was hard to be around. They looked at Lily and saw their grandchild, but they also saw the embodiment of their daughter's monstrous act. It was a wound that I wasn't sure would ever fully heal for them. I received a letter from Sarah once, about 5 years into her sentence. It was a rambling, self-pitying tirade, filled with accusations and justifications, but not a single word of apology. She still saw herself as the victim, a narrative she had constructed to protect herself from the enormity of her own actions. I read it once, then burned it in the fireplace. There was no room for her poison in our new life. I had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. I had to let go of the anger to move forward, but forgiveness and reconciliation were two very different things. The door to that part of my life was closed, and I had no intention of ever reopening it. One afternoon, when Lily was 6, we were looking through an old photo album I had kept, one with pictures from before she was born. She pointed to a photo of me on my 30th birthday, standing next to a smiling, vibrant Sarah. "Who's that, Mommy?" she asked, her small finger resting on her aunt's face. My heart did a familiar, painful clench. I had prepared for this moment. "That was my sister," I said, my voice steady. "Her name was Sarah." "Where is she?" Lily asked, her head tilted with innocent curiosity. "She's a person who made some very bad choices," I explained simply. "And because of those choices, she can't be in our lives. But you should know that she is a part of your story. A sad part, but a part nonetheless. And her choices led you to us, and for that, I will always be grateful." It was a simplified version of a devastatingly complex truth, but it was enough for now. She accepted it with the straightforwardness of a child and turned the page, her attention immediately captured by a picture of our old dog. The moment passed, but it stayed with me. It was a reminder that the past is never truly gone. It's woven into the fabric of who we are. My trauma, my sister's betrayal, they were part of my story. But they were not the whole story. My story was also one of survival, of a marriage that endured, and of the profound, unexpected joy of motherhood. It was a story of a woman who was pushed to the brink and found a strength she never knew she possessed. That evening, after Lily was asleep, I stood on our porch, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves against the shore. The salty air was clean and cold. I thought back to that morning 7 years ago, to the brown cardboard box and the impossible baby inside. I remembered the terror, the confusion, the feeling that my life was spiraling out of control. I had thought it was the end of my world, but I was wrong. It was the beginning of a harder, more complicated, but infinitely richer life. I was no longer just a Lara Vance, the woman who couldn't have a child. I was a Lara Vance, the woman who fought for her daughter. I was a survivor. I was a mother. And as I looked out at the vast, dark ocean under a canopy of brilliant stars, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, deep and abiding. The storm was over. We were safe in the harbor. We were home.